May I speak in the name of the risen Christ. Amen. So what on earth happened? How in heaven's name did a small group of terrified and distraught people who'd fled in panic and with considerable haste at the arrest and crucifixion of Jesus not only become the faithful, committed and joyful men of the New Testament, but the builders of the Christian faith and founders of the community known as the Christian Church? What thing of such compelling power and enormity could have brought all of this about? The answer, of course, is the resurrection. When the full weight and resources of the powers of evil and death that were unleashed upon the world had put Jesus on the cross and then in the tomb, God responded in the only way that would defeat them, by meeting Jesus in the tomb, by meeting Jesus in his death, and resurrecting him to a new life. The resurrection was the birth of Christianity. It was people's first and most powerful expression of faith, hope, and love in God. It was and remains life-changing and transformational. This is all because when Mary were at the tomb, and eventually when the disciples were in Galilee, when they all met with the resurrected Jesus, they didn't meet him as they had once known him. They met him in a new way. They met him not as a man who had come back to life, but as a divine and commanding presence. They met a risen Lord. That is what had happened. The resurrection brought about the dawning of a new community of faith. And the gospel writer Matthew was particularly keen to show this, because just as a new week was dawning, so a new era was dawning. The two Marys were at the tomb. They were in grief and fear. They came in mourning for Jesus, and when the angel arrived in quite spectacular fashion, they were understandably afraid. But the angel's first message to this new community, the two Marys, was one of hope and joy. A real hope, a new hope, and a real joy that dispels grief and fear. And in effect, he then commissioned them to be the first of the founders of this new community, because they had not run away. They were here, and therefore the honour and the responsibility was theirs. And it was as soon as they had accepted their commission and went obediently about their mission that they met the resurrected Christ. And when he greeted them with this single word in the reading, greetings, it doesn't really do justice to the depth of what he meant. Because this word actually means to show us that he didn't just say hello to them, but he took great delight in meeting them. He rejoiced in their company. He welcomed them in. He was full of joy when they met. And their quite natural and initial reaction became what was to be the first task of this new community, and that was to worship Jesus. And so they did. And if Matthew wants to make absolutely certain that to his readers that this was a full-bodied Jesus standing there, and not just some warm internal feeling or strange vision, he tells us that they took hold of his feet, because in Jewish thought, ghosts and apparitions have no feet. This new community was to be marked out not only by them worshipping Jesus, but by the community's joyfulness, its delight in being in his presence, and its welcome of others. In contrast to so many other religious and pagan sects and communities that were all around the world at that time, this new community claimed something different. It claimed that God's love was available not just to one group or one nation or one group of elite people within that nation, but to all people. Everyone was welcome into this new community. And within this community, people would be welcomed in to eat and drink with the risen Lord, to hear and tell of the stories of what he did and what he continues to do. And they would find forgiveness of their sins in his name. This is a community that the resurrection created. So this community that started at the tomb has, of course, evolved. And we today are living proof that this resurrection faith was not misplaced or just a fantasy. It really has stood the test of time, despite the battering from a cynical, mocking, and often hostile world. The strength of this faithful community has always come ultimately from its faith. Believing that God raised Jesus from the dead and liberated him from the tomb means that we can believe he is fully alive today, full of power and ready to greet us. It means that we can believe he really does hear our prayers. He does provide us with the nourishment of daily bread through his Spirit and his word. And when we gather together, he rejoices with us. It means that we can believe he really does deliver us from evil. He stands in solidarity with us in our sufferings and temptations, and it means that death does not have to have the last word on any of our lives. It means that the world can be changed. The resurrection has created and continues to offer a faith that can be defined like this: looking at life and the world as they really are, with all its pain, death, and suffering, and knowing that God is bigger. This really is resurrection faith, knowing that whatever is going on in life, good or bad, God is always bigger. This is the faith that the resurrection created. The resurrection of Jesus, then, is God's answer to all our fears, all our hopes, and all our longings. It's God having the last word. Jesus has been raised. He is going ahead of you wherever you are going in your life. He will greet you, and therefore you will be able to, in some way, meet him. Amen.